Caro, at this point, usually I start um, typing in a little bit on YouTube. Typing in a little bit, start typing in a little bit on YouTube.
Yeah, I think
Typing in a little bit, start. Uh-oh, what was that? We will be starting in about 3 minutes. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I think that we should start. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Yanitza Rodriguez, and I'm very excited to be today's Her Path webinar host through our initiative Seeds of Success program, which is designed to inspire and educate the next generation of scientists and engineers like yourselves right here in the greater New Haven area. Our mission, for those of you who are new to our program, is to break down barriers and tackle gender stereotypes in STEM fields. We've crafted this out of school program specifically for 6th to 8th graders in our community here in New Haven where this initiative serves as a dynamic platform to introduce young students to the vast opportunities in the STEM fields through three key components: the female scientist role models, on STEM workshops and activities, and a place-based STEM community outreach and leadership projects. Our team is composed of Dr. Giovanna Guerrero Medina, Carolina Machado, me, Yanitza Rodriguez, a PhD candidate, Ayana Das, which is also a PhD candidate, and Leslie Araloso, a PhD candidate as well. Here you have us as the aspiring future scientists that we were in our younger days, which is super adorable. And as you can see, we were always very excited and curious for what's to come in the future. As I said before, I'm a PhD candidate, and I'm very excited to announce our Her Path speaker for today, which is my amazing mentor and PI, Dr. Rachel Perry. She's an associate professor of the Cellular and Molecular Physiology and Medicine Endocrinology here at Yale University. One of her descriptions was that her daughter correctly describes her as a metabolism scientist, which is a clearer way of saying that Dr. Perry leads a research lab that is interested in how the nutrients that we consume and how our body uses them affects how our body responds to conditions like obesity, infection, and cancer. Dr. Perry is very passionate about mentorship, as you will soon learn once she describes more about her experiences and about finding ways to introduce new scientists to what she believes is the best job in the world. So, Rachel, if you don't mind, you can start sharing your slides, and we all get to know a little bit more about yourself and how you became a scientist.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. I just want to make sure, is Maria speaking next, or am I up? Maybe I was confused about the plan.
Angel and I are happy to go first if that works for you.
Oh, I may have been mistaken. Really, truly, either way, whatever you prefer.
Well, why don't we do a little talk and then we'll reintroduce you. I do have to say though, it is quite exciting to hear you speak because I've been there before and watched it and watched students. So I am excited about your talk. But we'll just take a minute or two of your time. And then I'm Maria Prenti. I'm the Associate Director of Public School Partnerships here at Yale. And Angel, who is going to speak to you, is on our team and runs Yale Pathways to Science. And we wanted to tell you a little bit about that today.
Yeah, so it's really nice to see everyone and to meet this team. I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Yale Pathways to Science. I think that this will be a really great opportunity for our Seeds of Success students to come in and experience all the amazing resources and knowledge that we have here on the Yale campus. So just to quickly go over the agenda of what we're going to talk about today, I just first want to welcome you into Yale Pathways to Science. So the great news I have to share with you is that congratulations, as a Seeds of Success student, you're automatically going to be enrolled into Yale Pathways to Science. And so we'll also talk about kind of what that means, how Yale Pathways works. And then finally, at the very end, we're going to show you a big QR code that you can visit to actually sign up and fill out the forms necessary to actually participate into Yale Pathways to Science events. So, as you may have heard, there's this awesome and really important thing called STEM, S-T-E-M, and that's for science, technology, engineering, and math. As Seeds of Success students, you've already raised your hand to say, I am interested, I am committed, I am excited about learning and future learning opportunities. So, as Yale Pathways to Science, what we do is we connect you, the interested students, with Yale faculty, Yale students, and Yale resources that are excited to bring you in to learn and to engage. So What kinds of things do we offer? We have about 200 events and programs each year that you are going to be welcome to as Pathways to Science scholars. Actually, we have lots of events that are exclusive to you as Pathways to Science scholars. So this is a really exciting opportunity. All of these events are designed to inspire you, to help you discover the many interesting and the variable possible careers that you might pursue in STEM. That's medical careers, that's biological careers, all different things that fall under STEM. We have engineers, mathematicians, all kinds of things. Now, are these events mandatory? Great question. I know you're thinking it. No, so what we do is we present you with a catalog of events that are happening each month, and you choose what you're most interested in, what you'd like to attend. So STEM fields can look like a million different topics. You might be someone who's really intrigued with dinosaurs or fossils, so you might want to visit one of our anthropology events and actually get to hold some bones. Or maybe you're someone who has a green thumb and you want to learn about plants, so you might join one of our events that takes place at a greenhouse or where you get to experiment with plants and leaves and things like that nature. Everything under that umbrella of STEM will be on offer for you. Actually, every single one of these photos, it pictures students from Yale Pathways to Science engaging in some of the events that we offer. Some specific examples of the events that you might be able to attend are, for example, Ophthalmology Day. That's one of Maria and I's favorite events because what we do is we bring students to the Yale Ophthalmology, the Yale Eye Center, and you get to dissect cow eyes. Yes, you heard that right. That's cow eyeballs. You get to learn how to use the slit lamp machine, all the kinds of things that you do when you go to the eye doctor and get a checkup. You learn all the science in the backside of how that process works. Funbotics is another program that's a little bit different. It's not one day, instead it's 7 sessions. On the very final day, students compete with their robots, and it's a really exciting time for students and families. Finally, I wanted to share with you one specific event that you should save the date for. You will hear about this very, very soon. This is the Chemistry Magic Show, and this is probably the largest event we offer every single year. This happens in the Yale Science Campus, and what we do is we bring students into this auditorium as young as 3rd grade, as old as 12th grade, and we put on a magic show. And then the magic show, behind the scenes, you're seeing all the science that goes into that. So one thing to note is that as a Yale Pathways to Science scholar, it doesn't matter if you start in 6th, 7th, 8th grade or beyond, you are a Pathways to Science scholar until you graduate high school. So that means for the next 4, 5, 6 years, you'll have access to these events and these programs. So another exciting thing to know is that in the summer, we have even more fun. In the summer, we focus on our 2-week summer programs. We have a science side and we have an art side. I want to talk to you a little bit about the STEM science side that we're planning for right now. This is a completely free 2-week program that happens on Yale campus, where you're engaging with workshops led by students and faculty here at the university. These are grades 9 through 11 are eligible to join us, and we usually have around 100 to 115 students join us each year. Now, if you are a rising junior, if you don't know what that means you're going to be a 12th grader in high school the following year. You can actually stay overnight on campus and experience what it's like to be a Yale College student. Here are a couple examples of workshops that we offer in the summer. So for example, we have all types of subjects from genetics to physics to psychiatry, all these things that might interest you. Finally, I want to officially welcome you once more to Yale Pathways to Science. And if you go to this link or if you use this QR code on the screen, you should be able to fill out a form. It might take you a few minutes, so you take your time with it. But once you finally fill out that form and submit it, you will officially become a Yale Pathways to Science scholar. So I'll leave this on here for a few moments for everyone to take a look and to get that QR code or link. And yeah, one last time, congratulations to everyone in the Seeds of Success program, and welcome to Yale Pathways to Science.
Thank you so much for letting us join.
Yay! So I'll leave it on for a few more minutes.
I also put it in the chat.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Maria, if you'd like to introduce Rachel next.
And I thought Yanni did a wonderful job introducing Rachel. I just get really excited about young people listening to Rachel and learning about her work. It's very exciting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
It's so exciting to be here. I should be sharing my screen now. Hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to grab a pointer. All right. Well, it is such a thrill to be here. And, you know, to be honest, I want to go back to school and be a Pathways student after hearing that program presented. We will be participating as a lab, hosting a workshop over the summer, as well as many other labs that are similarly excited to host students. And it's really a thrill to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about my journey and what got me to running a lab and being a professor, which I really do believe is the best job in the world. At least it is for me. So the goal here, this was a picture that my daughter drew at the age of 5. When in school, they had the kids drawing pictures of different careers. And one of the ones was, what do scientists do? And she drew a picture and it's labeled Mommy because that was her concept of what a scientist does at that stage. And really, you know, my goal, not only today, but in general in life is to figure that out. And what is it that scientists do and to make a positive contribution while doing that. So my 3 goals in this brief time that we have together are to tell you about how I became a scientist and how I'm not only a scientist, but a human being too, to discuss what my job is like as a professor running a research lab in metabolism or in nutrients, and what I love so much about it. And while talking about these 2 topics, I'll kind of intersperse some lessons that I've learned along the way. So it all began, I really became a scientist when I was diagnosed in November 1990 at age 4.5, so you can calculate how old I am if you want to, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This is an autoimmune condition where your body's immune cells are attacking the cells in your pancreas that make a hormone that tells cells to take up sugar from the bloodstream and into the cells so that you can use that for fuel. And with this condition, you are forced to become something of a scientist. So you have to do experiments on yourself because when we eat different types of foods, it does different things to our blood glucose. And we then have to adjust the amount of insulin, which is the hormone that is normally produced by the pancreas, in order to account for that. And similarly, different types of exercise affect our bodies in different ways. And so when you grow up with this condition, I don't really remember the time before I was diagnosed at 4.5. When you grow up with this condition, you are used to becoming something of a scientist because you are constantly doing experiments on yourself. So I always had some degree of understanding and appreciation, sort of natural function as a scientist. But I didn't always know I wanted to be a scientist. So as a middle schooler, I wanted to be a librarian or a performer in musicals. The librarian thing came from the fact that I enjoyed reading and I liked to organize things. And so the idea of alphabetizing catalogs of books just really appealed to me. And I enjoyed several types of music, played the piano, took a lot of years of piano lessons, and this picture was taken on the right when I was the accompanist for, I was a freshman in high school and was the accompanist for the middle school musicals at that time. And I also liked singing and acting and performing. So here I was as Maria in The Sound of Music when I was an 8th grader. Major extracurriculars were not science, and certainly starting out, not working in a science lab. I did, as I said, a lot of music, playing the piano, being in chorus, Here I was performing at a nursing home where I would go and volunteer periodically and play and sing for the residents. Here I was baking with a friend. This picture on the bottom is in middle school band playing the clarinet. I was the one in white in the front here. And here I was with two of our rabbits. Clover is on the left, and this is Benjamin on the right. For some reason, his name was Benjamin, but for some reason, my dad kept calling him Fred, so he became Ben Fred at that point. So the point of showing all of these pictures is to say that I always have had other things that I've liked to do in addition to science, and it took a while to know that I was ultimately going to become a scientist. My first research experience was in high school. I became interested. I'd always enjoyed science classes in middle and high school, although I didn't know I was going to become a scientist. But I had realized that I was interested in doing some research and talked to some of the teachers at my school who put me in touch with Dr. David Van Wagener, who was my first scientific mentor. I did a summer internship experience with him and did some research looking at slides, images from heart tissue from patients who were undergoing heart surgery, because of a condition called atrial fibrillation. And we made slides and looked at them under the microscope to look at the amount of immune cells that were in those heart tissues. And so I realized later how not that helpful I was because I didn't know anything, but Dr. Van Wagener was very gracious, and we actually still remain in touch to this day. I had the opportunity, I wish I'd taken a photo with him, but I had the opportunity to come back 20 years later when he invited me to give a scientific talk, which was really a very full circle moment. And that is one of the great things about this field. As you progress in your scientific career, you ultimately have friends all over the planet that you've met along the way in your training. And it can be a lot of fun. I've traveled to Japan and visited friends that I knew back when at an earlier stage in my career, and several other places like that as well. Now, when thinking about doing research as a high school student, the goal is really to help you experience doing science in a lab for the first time outside of classes. It's definitely not only for people who know at that time that they want to be scientists. I certainly didn't. I was planning at that point to be an English major, but knew that I liked science and wanted to try it out. And it's only about the experience. Any scientist who welcomes a high school student into their lab does not expect you to come with any specific knowledge. There will not be quizzes about particular scientific knowledge. They really just want you to have a good experience, see what science is like, and want you to learn. Now, getting to college, my college career also wasn't an exactly straight path. I went to college and in 2005 was a sophomore, planning to double major in molecular biophysics and biochemistry and music. Neither of those happened, but ultimately. And during this time, I knew I was interested in biology, and so I took a class called Physiological Systems. And my advice is, yes, please.
How did you come to plan to double major in those two fields?
So that's a great question. I think it's really because I really liked both those things. I knew at that point that I did like science, although my plan was not really to be a researcher at that point. But I'd always loved science classes in high school. And so I thought that would be fun. And the music was just kind of off the wall. I'd taken, as I mentioned, a lot of years of piano lessons and practiced a lot. And so I didn't like the idea of giving up on that at that point. But ended up, since I said neither of these two things happened, I decided to kind of go at it in a little different way. Keep the music. I would play the piano just for fun and accompany, play piano along with people who were singing or playing other instruments in college. So it remained a hobby, but not ultimately a major. And also at Yale, at the time, there was this rule that if you took music lessons, you had to major in it. So they didn't offer music lessons if you were not a major. I think they've loosened up on that since. So my advice in this, even though I didn't stick with either of these original majors, my advice is to prioritize the experience over the name of an activity. So one example of that is I realized the molecular biophysics and biochemistry major was very, we would call it very basic. So you spent a lot of time looking at not only cells in a dish, but even smaller than cells in a dish, thinking about genes and their regulation and things like that. I was more interested, I realized, in working with a whole animal and learning how the organs of the animal talk to each other metabolically, as opposed to how one particular protein would work. And so because I realized the experience would be better with a different major, I decided to change majors. But during this time, I took a class called, I said that twice actually, took a class called Physiological Systems and approached the teacher to ask for lab recommendations. So because of my experience with type 1 diabetes, I knew that I was interested in metabolism research. That is, again, how our bodies use different types of fuel. And so that person was giving a talk on metabolism, and I approached him to ask for lab recommendations. And the professor gave me a list of 5 scientists studying, again, how our bodies use nutrients. I emailed them all, and one emailed back, and then I was in his lab for the next 12 years, from undergrad to PhD to more training after my PhD called a postdoc, before opening my lab. Now, there were several important lessons from my mentor, Dr. Schulman, and my time in his lab. One of which, of course, is the science itself. The focus of this time is not really on the science itself, so I'm not going to talk about the major scientific conclusions, but we were focused on some of the early changes that occur during the progression to type 2 diabetes. So that is the other form of diabetes, which is more commonly associated with being overweight or obese, as well as certain genetics that can predispose. And it's important for us to understand what occurs during the progression, during the development of that condition, so that we can intervene in people who are at risk. I was reminded frequently that science can be such fun. I loved my time in that lab, in part because you have the opportunity as a scientist to, within limits, pretty much ask whatever questions scientifically you want. Dr. Schulman would tell me, the only rules about a project are you have to be excited, you, the student, have to be excited about it, he, the mentor, has to be excited about it, and we have to broadly have expertise that is related to it. And I've continued that lesson and that message in my own lab, because really the most important thing is that everyone is excited about their project. And one of the coolest parts about this is there are times as a scientist that you get to be the first person in the world who knows something about how things work. Because if you're doing that experiment, you're at the bench doing that experiment, you are the first person who knows the answer to that. And it's not a competitive thing. It's just so cool to have the opportunity to reveal new knowledge in that way. And so that really has always been one of my favorite aspects about being a scientist. So things progressed. As I said, I was not a music or biochemistry major. I majored in biomedical engineering. At Yale, we have this tradition called class day where everybody makes or gets a funny hat that is, whatever themed, whatever they want it to be. And so one of my other hobbies has always been knitting. So I knit this owl in Yale blue to put on the top of my hat for class day. So at that point, I was thinking about what would I do next. And I had for several years considered being a doctor, so an MD, a scientist, so getting a PhD, or potentially both. So you can be part of a program that allows you to do both, getting training in aspects of being a doctor and being a scientist. And so I decided to do that, to join the MD PhD program and train to be potentially both a doctor and a scientist. And so here we are. This is our MD PhD class on day one of the program. This is my first picture at Yale for graduate school, a very glamorous picture in the parking lot, but couldn't help but show that. So the way the program is structured is you do half of medical school. So you take a lot of classes that are aiming toward becoming a doctor. And then you do your PhD, so you're doing research in the lab. And then you go back to medical school to do hospital rotations. So you're already out of the classroom, then you're going into the hospital to under supervision to practice learning those clinical skills. And I loved med school. I really enjoyed the first 2 years of classes. And at Yale, it's structured where you do a little bit of clinical stuff in the hospital actually before your PhD. So I did 6 months of that as well. And I was interested in probably internal medicine or primary care. So potentially being a family doctor, likely I would have taken that role. And during this time, I was quite involved with Haven Free Clinic and the Wednesday Evening Clinic, which were both student-run clinics where students would see patients under doctor supervision. So it's not like we just sent our students out to see patients without supervision, but it was another aspect of training and really appealed to me because of the primary care aspect. Now, meanwhile, during this time, life was happening. So I showed you this picture of our class before. I started dating this guy, Curtis Perry, whom I married on October 15th, 2011. And this is on the Yale campus, of course. He had gone to Yale for undergrad as well. And so we go way back here. And this is our MD PhD class. Here's the director of the program at our wedding. Now, I think it's important to intersperse sort of life happening with science happening because this is how it goes. So I'm going to go back to the lab. Back in the lab, nothing worked scientifically for about 2 years. And this, is not actually that unusual of an experience. Research is up and down. So I always tell people in my lab, if we already knew the answer, we wouldn't be doing the experiment. That is what's different about learning science from textbooks versus learning to do science in the lab. When we read a textbook, things are presented as fact that we already know, whereas when we're doing research in the lab, we're trying to find those answers. And, for some people, this may not appeal to them. For others like myself, it's so much fun. But we do have to become comfortable with things not working as we're going through this process. But eventually things started coming together and we published a couple papers that were interested in, we had developed a new way of looking at liver fuel use and production. And we then used this tool to see how liver fuel use and production change in diabetes. So the liver is kind of a hub for glucose, a type of sugar. It both stores it and also makes new sugar when we need it. And that process can go awry in diabetes. And so a lot of my PhD was looking at those processes. Now, somewhere around this time, I mentioned the path wasn't a straight line, and I actually made the decision to transfer from the MD PhD program, so becoming a physician scientist, a doctor and a scientist, to the PhD program. And the reason for this is I felt that if I had gone back to medical school, so finished my PhD and then gone to the hospital to see patients, I felt that I would be leaving too much on the table. There were so many interesting pieces of science brewing that I wanted to finish them up. And it's not that somebody else couldn't have. Somebody else could have finished up those experiments and would have done a great job. But my love was really doing the science. And as much as I did enjoy seeing patients, I decided that I couldn't give that up and go back to medical school. And I also realized upon reflection about myself that if I had tried to be a doctor and a scientist at once, I would always feel like I was not doing either one of them very well. And I decided it would be better for my own sanity and happiness to do one of them really well. I hope that I do it well, and not try to do both. So at that point, I have finished a PhD, and the next step is what's called a postdoc. So doing more research, either in the same lab or in a different lab. Most commonly, people go to a different lab to get additional training before you're ready to run your own lab. And you may have guessed, given my long trajectory at Yale, that was where I did my next training, and stayed actually in the same lab to continue additional training. And this really solidified my interest in becoming a scientist who does mostly research. So one of the points I want to make here is that with a PhD in science, there's a wide range of what you can do. You can be a professor like I am, doing mostly research and a little bit of teaching. You can be a professor at a university where you're doing a lot more teaching and maybe less research. You can do advocacy. You can be on Capitol Hill advocating for funding for science. You can do scientific writing. You can work for a scientific journal and be an editor for journal articles. There are a number of, you can work at a company as opposed to a university. There are many different things that you can do with a PhD. And so one of the goals of postdoc training is figuring out which of those or something else that you actually want to pursue. And so it was very clear to me that I want to be a scientist doing mostly research. And during this time, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to explore a few different areas, including how the contents of the gut change how our body uses nutrients, developing new ways to improve metabolism in obesity, and moving into the world of cancer metabolism, which is one of the focuses of our lab today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, also during this time, life was happening. So I had my daughter May 15th, 2015. And her name is Julia, and she's wonderful, and came to lab with us a lot. So as my postdoc continued, I became even more convinced that my next step was to become a research scientist studying cancer metabolism. This is an area that's kind of become an increasingly hot topic. We know there are 13 tumor types where being overweight or obese gives you a higher risk of developing and also of dying from those particular tumor types, but we don't understand why that is. And so it's really going to be important to understand those links so that we can intervene in those links and make people more likely to do well with cancer treatment, and also perhaps save them from some of the really harsh treatments that can be very detrimental to quality of life. So I interviewed fairly broadly in many different cities for professor jobs and really did consider other locations, but I'm still here at Yale, just have not left over the last 20 plus years. So this was day one of my lab. It was one bench at that time. We've fortunately been able to expand a little bit. And also at this time, my husband was finishing his MD PhD, and here we are at his graduation. Julia was 3 at that point. And I started my lab and he started his residency, which is the next step of doctor training. So you are at that point a doctor, as in you have a medical degree, but you're not able to practice medicine without supervision. So this is a very full-time. The hours are quite long for both of these jobs. So my hours were always more flexible, but he always said I work harder than he does. And that's okay, because it's one of my favorite hobbies right now. I love my job. We had a lot of help from my parents in order to make it work. And so here they are with Julia when she was a little bit younger, but we were both still in training, being supervised by the dog, but I promise my parents were also there. And she also came with us to lab a lot. So when dad is a doctor in training and mom has 3 grants to write at once, baby sometimes comes to lab. And so she did a lot of playing with water and different pieces of scientific equipment, and became quite a good, this instrument that she has is called a pipette, and she became quite good at pipetting. So now in our lab, the big research question that we're pursuing, I have only a couple more slides, is to ask, how does whole body nutrient use affect outcomes in different conditions? So a large part of the lab focuses on cancer. We also have people working on reproductive function, that's Yanitsa, people studying infection, and also recovery from injury, rehabilitation after surgery. So you can see here, there's a wide range of topics, and that really is because, as I said before, the only rule is, the trainee has to be excited about it. I have to be excited about it, but that doesn't take much. I'm excited about all science. And we have to broadly have expertise to support it. So it has to be somewhat related to metabolism. And really, being a researcher is the greatest professional joy of my life. And we'll talk about why that is for the next couple minutes. And really, the biggest part of this is the lab members that I have the opportunity to work with. So in 2018, when the lab started, it was just me kind of rattling around in the bench, trying to do some research on my own. My first PhD student, Zong Yu, joined the lab in 2019. We grew quite a bit during COVID. So at this point, Julia started to draw pictures of my lab members, and we've documented through the years the pictures that she would draw of the lab. They've improved in quality. So you can see the rapid upward trajectory in terms of the number of people that we had in the lab up through late 2020. Time marches on. Here we are in 2021, all in our COVID masks. I started then keeping a world map with pins representing where each person was born who was in the lab. And so at this point, we've had members from 5 continents, still missing Antarctica and Australia. So if anyone knows anyone from there who would be interested in joining the lab, please have them contact me. Here we are as time is progressing in 2022. And here is our current group. The one on the left is a little bit outdated, but here we are in our Peri-Lab themed onesie pajamas that have, I don't know if you can really see, this is a mitochondria. It's a part of the cell that produces energy from fuels. And there's also my dog because he's our mascot in the Peri-Lab. So in summary, I would say life as a scientist, in my job at least, and this varies depending on what your job is, I would say it's probably half teaching, meeting, and working with trainees on their projects. About a quarter of time is spent reading and writing. A little less is spent in meetings, and much less is spent actually doing science. So if I'm being completely honest, I do miss a little bit the time at the bench, being the person who's actually carrying out the experiments. But the mitigating factor, the thing that makes that better, is that I get to mentor people who are the ones actually at the bench and get to walk with them in their journey toward being a scientist. And I also really love the outreach that we get to do. So these are pictures from when we've hosted Pathways to Science sessions, and have worked with local students who come in and work with us on exercise sessions, trying to understand how the body responds to exercise. And that has really been probably my greatest joy in this job. It has been getting to do a lot of that outreach, working with students. So I'm going to close with that. I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. And I'd love to know if you have any questions or anything you'd like to talk more about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perry.
Thank
Ok,
you.
chicas, si tienen alguna pregunta hacia la doctora Rachel Perry, este es el momento para hacerlas y yo se las traduzco a ella. También lo pueden escribir en el chat. We're just going to give them a little bit of time to digest.
Absolutely. And also, if you think of any questions later, feel free to email me. You can probably find my email or email one of the folks who's Yanitsa or others who are organizing this.
Okay, so our first question is from Isabella, and she asks, how many years, ¿cuántos años tienen como científica? Isabela, ¿te refieres a cuántos años ella estuvo como científica o cuántos años ella tenía cuando quiso ser científica? So, while she gets back to me, her question was, how many years did you have as a scientist, and what inspired you? Or like,
So,
how many years do you have as being as a scientist in Ho as well?
yeah, so I think I'm a strong believer that anyone doing science is a scientist. And so I guess I would say that I started doing science when I was a high school student. I would have been about 16. So it's been more than half my life. That would have been 22 years now. And, you know, I wasn't a full-time scientist at that point, but that would have been when I had started. And then the second part was who inspired me, is that right?
What inspired you
What
to be
inspired?
a scientist?
Yeah, so I think really it was, and I hate to keep harping on the same theme, but I think it was the joy of discovering things and the fun of working through a problem and figuring out a way to solve it, which is not something that at least I really got to learn in school. It was something you learn on the job, and I just found that to be so rewarding. That it was very exciting when I found out that I could make a career of this. There have been many times I remember saying, including during my training, both as an undergrad and a PhD student, you know, I can't believe I get paid to do this. It's not a ton. You don't get paid a ton to do this, but it was always something of both a hobby and a job.
I have a question for you.
Great.
And I'll translate to the girls as well. What gave you the confidence to reach out to people? Like the first person, I don't remember his name, that you mentioned, he helped you grow as a scientist.
Yeah. Did you want to translate it before I answer or after?
Um, we could do that at the same time.
Okay, so that's a good question. In high school, to be honest, I wish I remembered exactly how that went, but I honestly don't remember exactly how we got connected. I did know that he had worked with other high school students. So seeing that there had been others who had had that experience, I think was helpful. But, you know, I'll be honest, we're being real here. I still experience some degree of imposter syndrome in terms of, you know, having enough confidence to really get out there and ask for things like to be nominated for maybe an award that I might be qualified for, things like that. It's definitely something that I'm still working on. And you know, one of the things that I've found helps with that is saying it out loud. You know, no, I am qualified for this. I do belong here, kind of thing. And I think that's something that we all as a community have to do to build not only ourselves, but build each other's confidence up. Because I think sometimes for a lot of us, it is easier to see skills and positive attributes in other people than it may be to have that confidence about our own sense of belonging.
Thank you so much. I am jotting it in the group chat as we speak.
Great. Sorry, I do have a tendency to speak too quickly, so I realize I'm probably not making it easier on you.
Well, Years of knowing you, I actually got used to it. But
Yeah.
at first, it was very overwhelming because English wasn't my first language. And so I was like, oh my God, Rachel is so smart, but also she speaks so like fast.
I'm so
Lo que les
sorry.
digo, no, it's fine. Lo que le digo a Rachel es que como mi lenguaje no es el inglés como primario, se me hizo bien difícil entender cómo ella hablaba tan rápido y era más bien por su pasión hacia la ciencia, por la razón de por qué ella hablaba tan rápido. We also have another question. Let me see. It's coming from the YouTube live. How many and what type of scientists are there? Oh.
Yeah, so I don't know how many scientists there are. That's a great question. I can certainly look into that. Both of those are great questions. And there are so many types of scientists. Broadly, the types of scientists can be divided into kind of overall subject areas. So one of them is biology, which is how life works, so how plants and animals function and are put together. And there's also chemistry, how the different types of chemicals that there are put together. We're often discovering new this is not what I do, but scientists are often discovering new types of chemicals. There's physics, which is how the physical forces of the world work. So things like the planets and how they move around each other. How how does gravity work? Things like that, building rockets and that type of thing. There's geology, which is the study of how rocks are formed and what different types of rocks there are and how they evolve. There's anthropology, which is how evolution has worked and how we got from yeast and fish to apes and humans. You could define political science as the type of science. Economics, how money works, could be defined as a type of science. They're thinking about climate change. There are scientists who work in that area. So there are tons of different types. And, another plug for the Pathways program, which will really expose students to many different types of science in sort of short one-off types of exposures.
That is true. We have another question here. Let's see. Anyone? Ayana is asking, anyone have specific science questions that you want to ask Dr. Perry about the topics in her lab or such cool discoveries that have come at her lab? Oh, yes. Rachel, out of your 23 years, what is the most closest thing that you've come to like a eureka?
Yeah, so that was when I was a student, actually. And without going too deep into the science, basically we were trying to develop, in collaboration with another lab, we were trying to develop new ways to burn fat. Basically, we were trying to take a drug that people had known actually for 100 years can burn fat, but it doesn't do so safely. And so we were chemically modifying that compound. And the eureka moment was when I had put it into rats, given them, essentially we had put a needle into the mouth of rats to administer these different drugs, different modified drugs. And the parent drug, the unmodified form, caused a big spike in body temperature, which was a known side effect of this drug. And that is unsafe. That can cause actually many deaths with this drug, but our modified version did not. And I remember having that moment where, I saw that the original drug had this bad effect, but our drug did not. And it was late at night. I remember emailing my boss, professor, and I knew he would respond right away because he was excited to know what the results of that experiment would be. And we just had this kind of nerding out moment of excitement about, the fact that we knew this was going to work. I still remember the email I wrote him was, "This is going to work." And I will always remember that. And he still talks about it too, remembering that kind of moment of fun. But that was an example of what I talked about before. We were the only two people on the planet at that time who knew that bit of information and that it was going to work. And so I will always remember that as being one of the highlights.
Oh my God, that was a lot. Can you summarize it in one sentence, please, so I can put it there?
Yeah. It was a time that we knew that we had chemically modified a drug in a way that would make it safe and make it able to burn fat and improve metabolism. That was still a lot of ands, but hopefully
Nope,
better.
yep, I got
Sorry.
it. Yes. Translating right now.
The other, I think it's not so much a eureka moment, but one thing that I consistently have loved is when I've been working with high school students in particular, and they are able to lead their first research project. I love working with high school students, having that experience of doing that research for the first time. I never expect them to be able to really guide the research, but working with them as they have that first experience of discovery and doing science is really fun.
I am putting it here. We have another question. Is there a discovery from your lab related to lifestyle, type 1 diabetes that you have implemented in your life?
That is a great question. And yes, so understanding, I won't go into too much detail, but we've made some discoveries about stress hormones and how they affect managing blood sugar in type 1 diabetes. And so I have definitely implemented some strategies to reduce both physical and psychological stress and have found that to be helpful in managing type 1 diabetes. So that can be boiled down to stress hormones, just that.
Different question. Oh, sorry.
And I see a question, is it very expensive to study chemistry? And, there's a wide range. So there will be places that you can get scholarships and not have to pay a lot to study chemistry, as well as a number of other things. And there are places, there are places that are more expensive and may not have those scholarships available. So opportunities are definitely out there. To cut down on the cost, it often can require some looking.
Y lo que ayuda también con el costo de tu estudio es participar en programas como los de Yale Pathways, como los de Seeds of Success, ALTE, que van a estar hablándolo en la graduación, y muchos más. Así que si mantienen su pasión y motivación hacia la ciencia, van a encontrar que hay ayuda en todos lugares. I'm
And
telling
Rachel, just to interject, also, once you finish your college degree to go into a PhD, there are many programs where they'll, pay you a stipend to do your doctorate. The US, the nation needs so many scientists that there's many training programs that, if you're selected to be in that training program, they'll actually give you a stipend, so you don't have to pay for your doctorate. Is that correct?
Yes, and really that's the majority of science training PhD programs, I would say, in the US.
¿Alguna otra pregunta, chicas?
Well, if anything else comes to mind, feel free to contact me.
Oh, definitely
so
let them know,
much.
yes.
It was a lot of fun to be able to talk to you all. So thank you so much again for the invitation.
Thank you, Rachel, as always.
My pleasure.
Let me see. Okay, I think that we can then start wrapping up if we don't have any other questions. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you again, Dr. Rachel Perry and Maria Parente, as well as Angel for all their knowledge on all the programs that Yale has to offer. And I think that we can say goodbye now. Thank you,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.